Elena's shoulder wound burned every night, but nobody knew the real reason why. When someone knocked on her door that night, the secret she'd hidden for 3 years was about to come out. It was 11:47 p.m. on a stormy Tuesday in Denver, Colorado. Elena Torres sat alone in her cramped one-bedroom apartment on East Colfax Avenue, the old wound on her left shoulder throbbing with familiar pain. The scar tissue always acted up during thunderstorms, as if the weather itself was triggering memories she couldn't quite grasp. Lightning illuminated her small living room through rain-streaked windows as she carefully applied prescription ointment to the raised, angry flesh that served as a constant reminder of that night in Afghanistan. At 27, Elena looked older than her years. The bright-eyed girl who had enlisted in the army straight out of high school in San Antonio was gone, replaced by a woman haunted by fragments of memories that never quite fit together. She caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror as thunder rolled across the Colorado Rockies, hollow cheeks, dark circles under brown eyes that had seen too much, shoulder-length black hair that she kept tied back in a perpetual ponytail. 3 years had passed since she'd returned from her deployment with the 101st Airborne Division. 3 years of sleepless nights, phantom pain, and guilt so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. The VA doctors at the medical center in Colorado Springs had tried everything: therapy, medication, support groups, but nothing could shake the certainty that she had failed when it mattered most. Elena rubbed her shoulder, trying to remember exactly what had happened that night at Forward Operating Base Chapman in Kandahar Province. The memories came in flashes: explosions, screaming, the acrid smell of smoke and burning metal, blood on her hands. But the details remained maddeningly elusive, like trying to hold water in cupped palms. That's when someone knocked on her door. The sound cut through the storm's fury like a knife. Elena froze, ointment tube still in her hand. Who would come by at this hour? She lived quietly, kept to herself, avoided the few neighbors in her building. Her heart began to race as she approached the front door, bare feet silent on the worn carpet. Through the peephole, she saw a figure standing in the dim hallway light. Even in the distorted fisheye view, she recognized him immediately. The breath caught in her throat, and she stumbled backward as if she'd been struck. Master Sergeant Marcus Webb. Her former commanding officer. "Elena, I know you're in there," Webb's voice carried through the door, deep and steady with the authority she remembered. "We need to talk. Please." Elena's hand trembled as she reached for the deadbolt. She hadn't seen Webb since her discharge hearing 3 years ago. That final meeting had been brief, clinical, filled with medical terminology and paperwork that officially ended her military career. He looked older now through the peephole, gray threading through his dark hair, new lines around his eyes. But the most shocking thing was the thick manila folder clutched in his weathered hands. When she finally opened the door, Webb's piercing blue eyes met hers with an intensity that made her want to look away. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a Denver Broncos windbreaker, but he still carried himself with military bearing. "Elena," he said quietly. "Do you remember what really happened that night in Kandahar?" Elena's stomach clenched. "What do you mean, Marcus?" I remember everything." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. The memories were there, but they felt wrong somehow, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Webb stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, placing the folder on her small kitchen table with deliberate care. "No, Elena. You don't remember. And it's time you learned the truth." The apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Elena backed away from the table as if the folder contained something dangerous. "I don't understand." "What truth?" This is where the reality Elena had hidden from herself for 3 years started to emerge. Webb opened the folder with steady hands, revealing a stack of military photographs, medical reports, and official documents. "Elena, do you remember Private Tyler Johnson?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Elena's vision blurred, and she gripped the back of her couch for support. "Johnson. Yes, I couldn't save him. He died because of me. Save him from what, Elena? Webb's voice was gentle now, like a therapist coaxing a frightened patient. Elena closed her eyes, trying to summon the memories that tortured her dreams. The explosion. The building collapsed. I was supposed to get him out, but I was too slow. I got hit by debris, and by the time I could move, he was. She couldn't finish the sentence. Webb placed a photograph on the table, sliding it toward her. Look at this, Elena. With shaking hands, she picked up the image. It showed the aftermath of an explosion, twisted metal, concrete rubble, smoke rising from what had once been a two-story building. But something was wrong. The scene didn't match her memories. The destruction was less severe than she remembered, the layout different. This isn't right, she whispered. This isn't how it looked. Webb placed another photograph beside the first. This one showed the interior of a military hospital room. In the bed, connected to various monitors and 4 drips, lay a young man with sandy brown hair and bandages covering much of his torso. His eyes were open, alert. Tyler Johnson is alive, Elena. The words seemed to echo in the small apartment as Elena's world tilted on its axis. She stared at the photograph, unable to process what she was seeing. That's not possible. I saw him die. I held him while he what? Webb asked quietly. Elena's mind reeled. The memory she'd carried for 3 years, Johnson's lifeless body in her arms, the weight of his blood on her hands, the knowledge that she'd failed him, suddenly felt unstable, like sand shifting beneath her feet. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. But how? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. I remember finding him under the rubble. He wasn't breathing. His pulse there was so much blood. Webb pulled out a medical report, official letterhead from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center visible at the top. Elena, you suffered a severe traumatic brain injury that night. Grade 3 concussion with associated retrograde amnesia. Your memories of the incident are incomplete. Incomplete how? Elena sank onto her couch, legs no longer able to support her weight. The explosion happened at 2,147 hours on March 15. You were conducting a routine patrol with Johnson and 3 other soldiers when an IED detonated approximately 30 meters from your position. The blast wave knocked you unconscious and threw you against a concrete wall. You sustained multiple injuries, fractured ribs, lacerations, and most significantly, a traumatic brain injury. Elena touched her shoulder scar reflexively. But Johnson. When you regained consciousness approximately 40 minutes later, you found Johnson trapped under debris from a partially collapsed doorway. He was unconscious but breathing. You pulled him free and carried him 200 meters to the extraction point, where you maintained pressure on his wounds until the medevac helicopter arrived. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. Elena stared at Webb as if he were speaking a foreign language. That's not. I couldn't have. I remember him dying in my arms. That never happened, Elena. Johnson survived because of you. You saved his life. The room spun around her. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of nightmares, 3 years of believing she was responsible for a young soldier's death, and none of it was real? Why didn't anyone tell me? Elena's voice cracked. Why have I been living with this guilt? Webb's expression softened. The military psychiatrists thought it would be traumatic for you to learn the truth while you were still recovering. Your brain had created a false memory to process the trauma, and they were concerned that forcing you to confront it might cause additional psychological damage. Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, but her internal tempest was just beginning. So for 3 years, I've been living a lie. Not a lie, Webb corrected. A protection mechanism. Your mind was trying to cope with an overwhelming experience. Now you need to see how what Elena learned changed everything. Webb reached into the folder again, this time producing a cell phone. Elena, Tyler Johnson is here. He's been looking for you for 3 years. He wants to thank the woman who saved his life. Elena whirled around. Here? Now? He's waiting in the parking lot. He didn't want to overwhelm you, but he's been hoping for this chance ever since he was discharged from Walter Reed. As if on cue, Elena's doorbell chimed softly. Not the harsh knock from before, but a gentle, respectful sound. Elena, a male voice called through the door. It's Tyler Johnson. I know this is strange, but I was hoping we could talk. Elena's legs nearly buckled. That voice, she knew that voice, but not from her nightmares. This was different, warmer, alive. You won't believe what happened when Elena opened that door. With Webb's encouraging nod, Elena approached the door on unsteady legs. She paused with her hand on the knob, heart hammering against her ribs. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about that night, about her failures and guilt, it was all about to change. She opened the door. Standing in the hallway was a man in his late 20s with kind brown eyes and an easy smile. He was leaning slightly on a walking cane, favoring his left leg, but he was very much alive. He wore civilian clothes, khakis and a blue button-down shirt, and there was something undeniably genuine about his presence. Hi Elena, Tyler said quietly. Thank you for opening the door. Elena couldn't speak. She could only stare at this ghost-made flesh, this man whose death had haunted her dreams. You probably don't remember me very clearly, Tyler continued. But I remember you. You pulled me out of that rubble. You carried me when I couldn't walk. You saved my life. When they thought the revelations were over, the real story was just beginning. Tyler stepped into the apartment at Elena's silent invitation, moving carefully on his injured leg. Webb closed the door behind him, giving them space but remaining present for support. Elena, I know this must be overwhelming, Tyler said, settling into a chair across from her couch. Sergeant Webb explained about your memory issues. I can't imagine what these past 3 years have been like for you. Elena finally found her voice. I thought. I've spent every day thinking I let you die. Tyler's expression grew pained. Elena, you did the opposite. When I woke up in the field hospital in Kandahar, the first thing they told me was that a female sergeant had saved my life. They said you carried me 200 meters with a concussion and broken ribs. Elena shook her head slowly. I don't remember that. I remember finding you, but then. Then your brain protected you from the trauma by changing the story, Webb interjected gently. It's more common than you might think. Tyler reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small metallic object. Elena's breath caught as she recognized her own military dog tags, the ones she'd lost that night. You dropped these when you were loading me into the helicopter, Tyler explained, holding them out to her. I've been carrying them ever since, hoping I'd get the chance to return them to their rightful owner. Elena took the tags with trembling fingers. They were scratched and dented, with dark stains she didn't want to think about too closely. But they were hers, her name, service number, and blood type stamped into the metal. But you haven't heard the most surprising part of the story yet. Tyler, Elena whispered, why now? Why are you both here tonight? Tyler glanced at Webb, who nodded encouragingly. Because I'm getting married next month, Elena. And I couldn't start this new chapter of my life without finding you first. Without thanking you. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not the bitter tears of guilt she'd shed for 3 years, but something different. Something that felt almost like relief. There's more, Webb added, opening the folder to reveal additional photographs. Tyler wasn't the only one you helped that night. Elena looked at the new images, 3 more hospital beds, 3 more faces she vaguely recognized. Corporal Martinez, Specialist Davis, and Staff Sergeant Williams, Webb explained. After you got Johnson to safety, you went back. 3 more times. You pulled all of them from that rubble, Elena. 4 lives saved in one night. The revelation hit Elena like another explosion. She'd saved 4 people. 4 families still had their loved ones because of her actions that night. The final surprise was about to change everything Elena thought she knew about herself. Tyler stood carefully, leaning on his cane. Elena, I know this is a lot to process. But there's something else I wanted to ask you. Elena looked up at him through her tears. What? My wedding is in 3 weeks, at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. Martinez, Davis, and Williams will all be there. We call ourselves Elena's Angels. It's cheesy, I know, but it stuck. He smiled. Would you consider being my guest of honor? Elena couldn't speak. The weight of 3 years of guilt was lifting from her shoulders, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten, pride. I would be honored, she finally managed. Tyler reached out and gently squeezed her hand. The hero should be there when her save gets married. And that's when Elena Torres discovered who she really was. After Tyler and Webb left, promising to call with wedding details, Elena stood alone in her apartment. The storm outside had passed, leaving clear skies and visible stars. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror again, but the woman staring back was different now. The same scars, the same tired eyes, but something fundamental had shifted. The victim was gone, replaced by someone Elena was only beginning to recognize, a hero. She picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number in San Antonio. Mom? It's Elena. I know it's late, but I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you 3 years ago, if I'd known it was true. Her mother's voice, warm and concerned despite the late hour. Mija, what is it? Are you okay? I'm more than okay, Mom. I just found out that I'm not the failure I thought I was. I'm not a victim of war, I'm someone who ran toward danger to save others. I'm a hero, Mom. Your daughter is a hero. Elena walked to her window and looked out at the Denver skyline, twinkling under the clear post-storm sky. Tomorrow she would start therapy again, but this time to process the truth instead of living with lies. Tomorrow she would begin to build a life based on pride instead of shame. The scar on her shoulder would always be there, but now it would remind her of something different, not her failures, but her courage. Not what she couldn't do, but what she had accomplished when it mattered most. Elena Torres had saved 4 lives that night in Kandahar. Tonight, in a small apartment on East Colfax Avenue, she had finally saved her own. And this was just the beginning of her real story.